This is our last video lab. We're ending up human anatomy. So this will be the last part of the test number 4 if you are taking these tests. And what we're covering in this section is the human heart and the digestive system and the urinary tract system. So this is a model of the human heart. Now, ignore these red tubes hanging off of it. Those are bypasses. This is actually a model that's good for bypass surgery to show what goes on with those. But we're going to track, explain to you the chambers of the hearts and the different arteries and veins. But then we're going to talk about how does the blood flow through the body? How does it come into the heart? Where does it go next? So the heart does have 4 chambers. It has 2 atriums, and the atriums is where blood enters the heart. Just like in a hotel, if you walk into a hotel, a lot of times they'll have plants, and they call that the atrium, where you walk through. That's where you enter. And so you have a left and a right atrium. So left atrium and right atrium over here. And then the chambers below that are the ventricles. You have a left and a right ventricle with that too. But you'll notice that there's these little valves here. Look a little bit like spider webs, and if we could have done the sheep heart dissection, you would have seen these valves, and it does look like really tough spider webs inside. But that is the AV valves, A and V. So what's that stand for? That is the atrium ventricle, the atrioventricle valve. So you have a left and a right AV valve, and so what happens is, as blood flows into the atrium, this valve closes so it doesn't just go down into the ventricle. And then when your heart pumps, this opens up. The blood will then come down to the ventricle. This valve will shut off, and then your ventricles will pump, and your ventricles is what really pushes the blood out up through the arteries. Now, in order to get out, there's another set of valves. So you got your AV valve here, you got an AV valve here. If we look underneath here, and I'm hoping we can see it, there's another valve in the back here, and I don't think there's enough light. You can see this one right here. This little valve right here is a semilunar. You're only seeing half of it here. It's really made up of 4 parts that will then open and close. So that's a semilunar valve. Really stupid way to remember it, but I had a student at one time who said, well, the only way he could remember that was semi-lunar was it looked like somebody was starting to shoot the moon there, but not completely. So he said that was reminding him of it could be semi-lunar. So you have your atriums, your ventricles, left and right AV valves, and then your left and right semi-lunar valves. And then so let's talk about blood flow. That's the major chambers of the heart. So we're going to be talking about the heart with oxygen-poor blood and oxygen-rich blood. What's the primary purpose of your heart? Of course, it's to pump blood. Now, why is that so important? Well, every cell in your body has got to have sugars and oxygen. And the amino acids that you get from the small intestines, and so all that stuff is floating around in your blood, but it's carrying oxygen. Now, why is oxygen important? Remember what we talked about, like the first lab. Sugars are overarchingly important in everything in biology. Every cell in your body needs sugars for energy. You get your energy by breaking down sugars. Now, where did those sugars come from? They came from the plants who took the sunlight and converted it into sugars and stored it, usually as a carbohydrate, as a starch, and that's why we get so much of that energy through pastas and breads and potatoes and things like that. It's not just simple sugars. But then your body breaks down those starches into their individual sugars. So when the plant makes too much, it just starts adding glucoses together and forms a big molecule of starch that your body breaks down. Now, every cell in your body has to have that sugar in order to survive, in order to function, in order to do its metabolic functions. So your heart is pumping to deliver those sugars, but when you break down those sugars, you have to have oxygen to break them down to get the energy out. So if you remember, plants take carbon dioxide in and release oxygen. So they take the carbon dioxide to make the sugars. We're doing the exact opposite. We need oxygen to break them down, and we release the carbon. We breathe out carbon dioxide. So we have to have oxygen coming in order to break apart sugars. So let's say your blood now has been all over your body. It's delivered all the oxygen that it had with it. And so now it needs to pick up more oxygen because if it doesn't pick up more oxygen, you're not going to live. So the blood flows back into the heart through the vein system, but they empty into this major vein system here. This is called the vena cava. So this is the superior, where all the blood from above the heart empties into the heart, and this is the inferior vena cava, where all the blood from below the heart comes back into the heart. But you'll see that they both empty into the right atrium. And so oxygen-poor blood enters into the heart through the right atrium. Then what happens? That AV valve opens up right here, and the blood comes into the right ventricle. Then, on the next part, the AV valve shuts, the semilunar valve opens, and so the ventricle pumps the blood up and out. So oxygen-poor blood enters the heart through the superior and inferior vena cavas into the right atrium. Then through the right AV valve into the right ventricle. Then through the semilunar valve, the right semilunar valve, and then it goes up. Now we're coming out, and we're oxygen poor. We're coming out here through these. This is the pulmonary veins. I'm sorry, your pulmonary arteries. It's being pumped to the heart. Now notice something here. It branches off here real quick. It's a very short artery. So where's it going? Well, it's going to pick up oxygen, so it's going to the lungs. So how far does it have to go? Not far at all. So if our heart is right here, it's just pumping it sideways into the lungs. Now there are capillary beds in your lungs. And so you breathe your air in, it pulls the oxygen out into those capillary beds. And so now you've taken oxygen-poor blood from all over the body and you've pumped it into the lungs. Well, that is called a pulmonary circuit. So we take oxygen-poor blood, deliver it to the lungs to where it is oxygenated, and now it goes back into the heart. So the right side of the heart is for oxygen poor. Now it's going to come back into the left side of the heart. The left side of the heart is for oxygen-rich blood. Something else I want to show you here. You'll notice that the right ventricle here is smaller than the left. Now, why is that? Remember where it's pumping to. It's got to pump it just a few inches, and it's right there in the lungs. The left ventricle is much larger. Why? Because it's got to pump from the heart all the way to the tip of your fingers, to your toes, to the top of your head. So it is coming out under high pressure, so it can deliver the blood and the sugars and everything else. Remember, it picks up the sugars in the small intestines and the amino acids and things you need and delivers it all over the body too. All right, so the blood enters back into the heart, and we'll see these two right here. This is the pulmonary veins. Now, they're red. Everything on the heart that's blue is oxygen poor. Everything on the heart that's red is oxygen rich. So it enters here, and it goes into the left atrium. Then it'll go through the left AV valve into the left ventricle, up through the semilunar valves until it hits this big artery. This is the aorta. And you have branches off the aorta, but the aorta will then curve back and go down below the heart. So that'll be your dorsal aorta that will deliver the blood all over to the bottom part of your body, and it'll branch off here at the top to deliver the blood up through your arms and up through your neck, up to the brain. So let's go through this whole system again. All right, so oxygen-poor blood comes through the superior and inferior vena cavas into the right atrium. Goes through the right AV valve into the right ventricle. Up to the right semilunar valves, through the pulmonary arteries to the lungs, where it picks up the oxygen. Then it flows back into the heart through the pulmonary veins, into the left atrium, through the left AV valve, left ventricle, and then up to the left semilunar, up to the aorta, to deliver to the rest of the body. And then once it delivers all the oxygen that it needs to deliver, it comes back through the superior and inferior vena cava, and we start the whole process again. That is why your heart is constantly beating, so you can get that oxygen out. Now, the heartbeat typically goes bump, 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 right? What makes those noises? Well, believe it or not, what you're hearing, that first bump, the thump, is the AV valve shutting, the semilunar valves opening. What's the second part? It's just the opposite. The AV valve opens, the semilunar shuts. So it's bump, 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 bump. And your ventricles here is the muscle, and that's what's going to be pushing that blood out. So arteries coming out of the heart are being pumped, so they are very high pressure. If you've ever cut an artery, you'll have seen that. I cut an artery in my thumb once when I worked at Pizza Hut. And at first I thought it was kind of neat because it was a pretty deep cut. I hit the artery. And as my heart would beat, every time my heart would beat, a little stream of blood would come shooting out. So boom, until I realized that that's not good for that to be going on. So they took me to the emergency room and they put stitches in it for me to close that off. So arteries are high pressure. Veins is just the blood flowing back in. So that is not under high pressure. That's why when they draw blood, typically they'll take it from the veins, so it'll just naturally. That's why they have to use a syringe to pull it out to get it going. So that is the heart. Now on this test, the last part that we're going to be looking at here is the digestive system and the urinary tract system, and you need to know the functions of all of these. And I know it's going to be hard for you to see this on the video. I wish we weren't doing it this way, but this is where we're at. So this is a model of the digestive system. So we need to know certain parts here for the digestive system. So as you eat, this is the first part of the digestive system. This is a muscle called the esophagus. And why is it a muscle? Because it flexes. So when you start to swallow, this top part of the muscle will contract and push the food a little bit further. The next part will contract, push it a little bit further. The next part will contract, push it a little bit further. But this happens so fast that you don't even register it. And it shoves it directly down into this sac right here. This is the stomach. So the esophagus delivers the food from the mouth to the stomach. And the stomach here is an open sac. And there's acids and enzymes that are being dumped in there to help you break apart your foods into sugars, amino acids, and nutrients that your body needs. Okay, let's leave that off. All right, now this big, large brown thing here, that's your liver. This is actually only one lobe of it. It would actually come all the way across here and down through here. What does your liver do? Well, the primary function of the liver is it filters your blood to get things out of the bloodstream that should not be there. But on the digestive system, you'll see underneath it here, there's a little green gland. And it actually is green if you would open it up. Your liver produces something that's used in the digestive system. It produces bile. Your bile is stored in this little gland here. This is the gallbladder. It's where bile is stored. And there is a little tube that will empty into the stomach. And so what is bile and the gallbladder used for? When you're trying to digest fatty foods, fats are hard to digest. And so your body uses bile and a couple other enzymes to help break that fat down. Now, fat is an excellent source of sugar. It really is, because what is fat? It's a bunch of sugars put together in typically 3 tails or 2 tails connected to a glycerol head. But those tails are glucose molecules put together so that as your body breaks them apart, you're getting a ton of energy out of that. And so the liver and the gallbladder is important in this process. Now, the next thing down, underneath the stomach here, see this little pink area? Let me get closer here to it. This looks like a little tongue back in here. That's the pancreas. Your pancreas produces 2 enzymes. And those two enzymes control the amount of sugar you have in your blood at a certain time. Too little sugar is a very bad thing because remember what every cell needs sugars in order to have energy to go. So your blood is delivering the sugars all over your body. Too little, your cells are going to start to die off. So it produces an enzyme that goes to your fat that is stored in your body and starts breaking that down into sugars. What happens if you're in a rush, you don't have time for lunch, you grab 3 Snicker bars and a Mountain Dew and you chug those down real fast, and so you put just a ton of sugar into your system. Now you got too much sugar. That's bad too. That will lead pretty quickly into ketoacidosis, so that's not a good thing. So this pancreas will also secrete another enzyme. This one's insulin, and insulin will grab those sugars out of your bloodstream and connect them together to form fat. And so the insulin takes the sugar out of your blood and stores it elsewhere. The glycogen takes the released by the pancreas too, goes into when there's not enough sugar and goes and breaks down the fat. And so the pancreas is very important because you want to keep just a normal level of sugars all throughout in the blood system. All right, so that was the next part. Now, below that, you'll notice that we've got the curlicues. This is the small intestines. Again, much longer than the large intestine. The gray part here is the long intestine. So you'll see that it's only about maybe 1.5 feet, 2 feet long. The small intestines can be up to 24 feet long, and they're much thinner. That's why they're called the small intestine. They're thinner. But this small intestine is where the food that is being partially digested or mostly digested enters the small intestine. It continues to break down things there, but there's little villi that stick out in that lines the small intestines, and there's capillaries that go there with active proteins, and they will grab the sugars out of there, and they will grab the amino acids and the minerals, the things you need, and pull it into the capillary beds, into the bloodstream here in the small intestine. So the small intestine is very important because that's where you're absorbing all your sugars, amino acids, minerals, things you need to live. Now, after it has gone through the 24 feet of your small intestines, there's really not much left that's good in there, so it's just waste. So now it enters the descending colon here and your large intestine, and it is going to, the main thing it does is absorb the water. So you're recycling water, but also making a package that you can deliver really quickly and easily out the bottom here. So this is the rectum. If your large intestine is not functioning right, there's a sickness or a disease. You have dysentery or diarrhea. So that's what it's like when your large intestine is not functioning right. So be thankful for your large intestines. But this rectum here is actually called a sphincter muscle. A sphincter muscle is a muscle that is round and it can close and open like this, so a sphincter. It's one of my favorite words in biology, sphincter, because that is what the rectum is. And so you can call somebody a sphincter and they have no idea what you're talking about. But that is the parts of the digestive system that you need to know. And you need to know not just the parts, be able to identify them on the model, but also to know their functions. Now, if you decide to do the paper, guess what you're doing? You're going to be giving me all these parts and giving me their functions in the paper. So it's basically the same work. We're going to on the paper, you're going to be going through the blood flow through the heart real quick to talk about oxygen pour, comes in the right side, goes up to the lungs to get oxygen, and then it goes to the left side, it's pumped all over the body. That won't take you long on the paper. You'll need to write about the eye, too, about the different parts and how we see and what each part does. So you have options here. You can study these things and come in for the tests, or you can turn the paper in April 28th and by then, and just email them to me, and we'll get you a grade out by the time the semester's over. I hope this is over soon. I hope we're back summer term in the best possible world. Fall term, if things drag out, but y'all stay safe and stay well. Especially if you have people at risk around you, if you're living with the older parents or grandparents, or you're around them. Stay in, stay safe. and hopefully we'll see you on campus again this fall. Don't forget to register for your classes. Registration for the fall term is going on, so you can call your advisors. You can do all that over the phone, but hopefully we'll see you here soon. So this is, I think, the last section that we're going to be doing for the video part of this lab.